Happy to be here, all of you. It's been a significant kind of line of thinking that led us to this panel to begin with. Because when we did the CDF the last time round, we did it virtually, but we did not have a specific set of conversations with the private sector. And while at one level we keep looking at the private sector as someone who kind of benefits from government services, we also realize that the private sector plays a far more important role in the provision of services, in the support of running the nation, as it were. And therefore, we thought that the voice of the private sector, rather than as a recipient, but as a contributor to the government and to the services that we offer to citizens, is something that's important that we wanted to kind of listen to. And I am glad that I could get the three of you here, because two of you represent the consulting world where you formally kind of work with the government, and Vaishnavi comes from Tata Power, where while it's an entirely private sector institution, the kind of work they do kind of strongly interlocks with the government, and therefore there's a fair bit of conversation that I presume you have with the government as well. And that's really what we're kind of trying to tease here. We can pick some of the big questions and pick some of your experiences, as it were, in working with the government. And I'll jump straight into that. And Nana is a good friend, so I'm going to call you Nana as we speak today. So I'll start with you, Nana. So, one of the things that we keep looking at, and like I said, we keep looking at the private sector as the beneficiary of the government, but it's also a co-partner with the government in a lot of cases, and most of you work very actively there. I just want to understand, how do you experience the government? I mean, I'm using the word in a very conscious sense, because you also work a lot with the private sector, you work with the development sector, you work with the government. Trying to understand what does it mean working with the government, what are the kind of stakeholders who interface with, what are the differences you see, etc. So go for it, Nana.
Thanks, Geeta. Thank you so much for this.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Geeta. Thank you so much, and thanks for giving us this, giving me this opportunity, giving us this wonderful audience where we can. I'll just share my thoughts.
Yeah, please.
As direct as I can. So we, as you know, government depends, if I can use the word, or relies or uses private sector human resources, consultants and others in a big way. Because even though government is one of the largest employer, more than close to a third of employment happens with government. So, but still, there is a lot of government dependence on private sector workforce. It speaks a lot about the quality and right resourcing that happens in government. But when I look at government, I always get this feeling that it's not homogeneous. At one level, you have IAS officers and senior set of people who are absolutely brilliant. And working with them, you realize how sharp they are on the uptake and how they are able to juggle between various things and genuinely get into problem solving and other things. And then there's a huge gap. And then there are a set of people who, for lack of other reason, are always need to be driven to do certain things. It is always led by, what can I say, a definition of what they need to do, and they don't get out of that definition of what needs to be done. And like we heard today morning, like what almost all of them said, there is no job definition in government. So if there is no job definition, and there are a set of people who go by the rule book and say, I'll do it only when it is defined, there comes the problem. And so there are a set of people who mean well, who are coming out with a whole bunch of new initiatives, and then there is the machinery that is just refusing to get along. Now, when I looked at it very quickly, I thought there are 5 reasons that came to my mind as to why this is happening. In short, government seems to be in a bit of a time warp state. They say more than academia. People actually accuse academic institutions as something that don't open up, don't go there and other things. But in terms of capabilities, especially the lower, and the reason is, one, there is, like I said, process oriented. The people in government pride themselves as somebody who knows the process. Who's the better employee there? Who knows the process well? I know that this happens, this takes so much time, this needs to go to somebody, and there is no, what is happening right now? Systems have taken over, and process in that sense is not as important, because there's a system that is taken over. You want to do land registration, the process can happen without going through what used to be a process once upon a time, and in various different. So the first point of process orientation and the pride in the knowledge of process and other things perhaps is no more relevant. Second, let me be quick. Government actually prides themselves in maintaining status quo. Originally because maybe they were brought in to get in stability. Maybe there was, I'm just guessing, like once when these things were formed, So they were there to bring in order, but currently what is required is not order, they need to be innovative. So that's why I said there's one end of government that is moving fast, but the other end who perhaps doesn't realize, and they go back to what they've been trained, what was handed down to them, maintain order, maintain status quo, bring in stability kind of, that's the second. Third, the notion of time is very different there, right? Once upon a time, maybe it was okay when you apply for something, right? You apply for a ration card, say, or a passport, or whatever it is. There was a time frame, and that time frame decided when they will work, how they will work, and other things. Today, neither the civil society nor even the industry and other beneficiaries can wait for so long. And there are means of doing it. So the instant service or what you need is just not happening. So what we need is minutes and days. Maybe it takes weeks and months there. According to them, that is right. That's third. Fourth, usage of technology. This is improving a lot. But like, for example, are you using data analytics? Are you using artificial intelligence? Drones have slowly started coming in. And even social media stops with WhatsApp. So what is the use of technology? Whereas look, and the ERP era is gone. And at best, government says now we have enabling system automation and other things, but that's just behind. So that's the fourth one. Fifth, the most important, is now the world is asking for transparency and disclosure and other things. Government is used to saying, this is how we work, and I'm supposed to not show it all to you for whatever reasons that was there for. So in my view, for all these 5 reasons, the workforce that is there in government is perhaps not in sync with the requirements that is needed today. And hence they are leaning on a lot of private sector. As we go, I'll come back to what we can do and what we are doing. So if you ask me what is the interaction,
come back to that, yes.
I'll pause.
Great. Thanks, Nana. So I'm just going to jump across. Vijay, so a couple of points very specifically I want to pick from your experience, and I know you're in the consulting space as well, but 2 things that I'm wondering how you look at. For instance, the debate between process and systems, right? A lot of consulting we do, we try to kind of say, help set up processes, help set up systems, the standard language that you guys are more adept at than we can ever be. But if you kind of go a little deeper onto that part, what's been your experience with government, especially on the process system side?
What Nana mentioned, to large extent, that is absolutely correct. Because being in development sector, development advisory space, we are interacting at central level where we are interacting with secretary, and then working downwards, and Gram Panchayat at board level, we are Gram Sevaks, we are interacting with teachers here, we are interacting with A&M, Anganwadi workers, and also in middle, state level, then state level employees, departments. If in education, you can see BEOs, DEOs. Huge difference. IAS, at IAS level, the kind of training they go through, maybe that, the kind of rotation that happens, the kind of orientation that they have, they are able to be part of those discussions and work, and they are able to engage that. But when we interact further down, then the entire understanding of a particular program, particular scheme, particular action, that is lost. And it is just revolves around processing those files, those actions, and nothing beyond. So there is no additionality which is happening from, if you see at grassroots level, where the connection is happening, where the service delivery is happening. So again, this is a very challenging thing, and this is also true for not-for-profit organizations as well as consulting, where the service delivery is happening, there the capacity, and where the plans are made, their capacity is hugely different. And another major challenge, and it will come, and everyone discussed, and here, when you talk of capacity building, you are looking at individual, then organizational, and then systemic. So this is the normal capacity building framework that is used by UN. Everyone uses that. So even if you have training component, but if not, other things have not changed, they are not effective. They cannot deliver on those services that they are supposed to be doing, because the organization and systemic things that have not changed. So if you, like, we did a training need assessment for A&Ms and Anganwadi workers and ASHA for immunization. You can train them. You can tell them You can have all the training mechanisms, you can tell them. But if vaccines are not arriving on time, if the cold storage is not functional, if they have to travel a lot and they do not have sufficient kind of remuneration to do that, where is the service delivery happening? So again, that is why when Mr. Anthony talked about training, that is where the challenge is. The challenge is that we have taken capacity building in government synonymous to training, and all sort of training happens. And we are there, and consulting firms like ours, we provide a lot of training. And there are IIHs as well and others, we provide a lot of training. But training without the other systemic changes would not result in the change that we are looking for. So we will have all the processes, but there is no action around that. Like Nana mentioned, one of the new things, earlier when IT system came, in government it was website. Website used to be a big thing, that you have a website. Now the new buzzword is dashboard. Every department has a dashboard. You can go to any website, any department, you will have a dashboard. Everyone starts with that. Now what to do with the dashboard? What is the purpose of the dashboard? How decisions are made through the dashboard? That kind of understanding may be there at a higher level, but beyond that they do not know. So it becomes a mindless job of just collecting information and then putting it through. What is happening, what I'm going to do with that, I don't know. So for me, when I look at capacity building, government and my interaction with that, it has to happen at all levels. And then we have to look at systemic changes that is required, organizational changes, and then the training and capacity building element has to come. If that is not going to happen, all this training that we are providing would not lead to anything. And finally, one basic, I have seen this, my experience, you usually find one in Tamil we call Ayyo Pavam, which is one sorry figure who is sent to all the trainings. So you do not have someone else, you have not seen the training as per the system, what is required, and you have one person who is there in all the training because you do not know what to do with this person. So he is the person or she is the person who attends all the training. So when that is the kind of system that is there, we cannot expect that the change is going to happen. But what CBC and Balu mentioned, those are in right direction. Now the major crux is how it is going to get implemented. And Nana is there. They are also engaged with Capacity Building Commission. We are engaged with Capacity Building Commission. So we also realize that it is not going to be so straightforward. There are a lot of challenges which are there on building capacity, and it will take as I mentioned, a decade or so when these things will become natural, where they would be looking at change, they would be looking at service delivery, they will be taking care of technology, consumer centrism. So those things will happen, but it's a decadal thing. So I'll stop here. I'll come back to Taki.
Sure. Thanks, Vijay. Vaishnavi, I'm kind of trying to pick this up from a slightly different angle. And disclosure, I've worked with the Tata Group long back. But when you look at the Tata Group, with the size, scale, complexity of the Tata Group, it, in some sense, you can liken it to a government of sorts in terms of the complexity that it deals with, right? 80 industries, so many thousands of people, etc. Right? TCS alone. Okay. I will not get it. But so in that sense, Nana talked about a few things like speed, right, or status quo. These are typical challenges that any big organization tends to develop because it has to have certain rigidities to make itself more efficient. I just want to learn from you, especially because of your role in terms of looking at sustainability and looking at the area which is relatively new, even in industry standards, let alone for the Tata Group. How has the Tata Group been able to kind of stay nimble or respond in a way that perhaps Nana wants the government also to be?
No, great. I think it is very apt to say that the size and scale of industries that the Tata Group has almost makes it mammoth, and therefore moving things across different organizations with the stated intent is sometimes a bit of a challenge. But what we really benefit from is the large amount of focus that the leadership has on emerging topics. So anything which is an emerging theme starts both bottom up and top down. And with sustainability, there was a project called Project Alingana, Embracing Sustainability, that was taken up right from Chairman's office. And there were people across all of the key industries which were contributing to the space who worked together to set out the aspirations that the organizations would then pursue. So now, with the construct having been set and the processes being put in place, it's a matter of implementation. There, yes, of course, having a common understanding of what sustainability means or any emerging topic means is the challenge. And that's where the critical element of training enablement comes. So the common language of sustainability is part of our role in the corporate. We work across SBUs and we are present across the value chain of generation, renewable and conventional, T&D, and for each of them the interpretation is different. So this capability development then becomes the execution, then becomes our responsibility. But when you have that amount of focus from the leadership, I think then percolating it to the working grassroots levels is a little bit lesser of a challenge.
So yes, I think even Balu kind of talked about the importance of leadership, as it were, and you started off by saying there are some brilliant officers who lead the charge, but there are a lot of others who don't follow suit. But leadership is also something that doesn't just happen, right? So it's also something that has to be in the institutional DNA. Either you have a systematic process to develop leadership, or you have a hiring process that makes sure you hire the best of talent, etc. Any reflections on that in terms of how, if you say your leadership is good, it just didn't happen, right?
Yes. So one interesting aspect about this space, and because it is new, you will see people gravitating towards it from many different diverse fields. There are people who are communications professionals who are gravitating towards sustainability. There are people from strategy team who are coming in. There are people from finance who are coming in from the aspect of investor relationships and disclosures, etc. So I think what is happening is there is a natural ecosystem which is developing and which is being encouraged. So each organization, depending on what is the focus, the right people are getting picked up. My case and example is that I came in from business development strategy, branding and communications, and then into sustainability. So sustainability is not something which comes from my educational background, but it's something that develops from a space of passion. And then that is groomed and mentored accordingly.
So you sound like classical IAS officer, gone through multiple things, but kind of end up in something else. So that's kind of job rotation of some sense. But is that voluntary? Is that kind of driven consciously? How does
Absolutely. So I think there is a very strong culture of mentorship called Aspire within the group. And this conversation is a two-way conversation. It's by no way something that is given to you.
Great.
It's something you can opt for.
Okay, so I'm just going to pick one more, coming back to you, Nana. So we spoke about systemic change, we spoke about dashboards, etc. And typically when we talk of dashboards, right, there's also this conversation about garbage in, garbage out, right? So how accurate is the data is a function of what goes in. And that's something that's been subject to a lot of debate, especially in the government circles. In the private sector, we don't hear that, we don't know, because that's within close groups. Here it's like open to the public, etc. Therefore, and working in kinds of projects that generate huge amounts of data, I just want a little bit of reflection, because ultimately data is what is going to drive decision making, right? So even if you have a dashboard, if that dashboard says 80% of the country has a running water tap in the house, it means that this mission has been successful and we no longer push it. Right? That is a very significant decision, and if that's being taken on data which potentially is kind of questionable, it underpins a lot of action here. So I just want to hear your reflections on that aspect.
So increasingly, and there are enough statistics, again data that says that we are adding so much data into the system that's equivalent to whatever data that was there for since the world began and things like that. But what's happening in government is, I see there is no dearth of data. You go to government, you want any data, even our government, as an Indian government, other governments across the world, getting data is not an issue at all. But then 2-3 things. Are you getting data in the right format? Or do you need to massage the data before you make any meaning out of it? One. Are you getting right data? And then I go back to training. Most of the time, the data collection is being done by people who are at the grassroots level. Do they know what is the relevance of data? Or are they mindlessly picking up data, sometimes cooking up, sometimes putting whatever that they think is appropriate and other thing? It happens because the importance of data and how that is going to connect to something big, the dashboards that the big bosses use is not known. So typically you have a set of people so that data travels through a lot of paths before it reaches there, and hence the veracity of data, the accurateness, and most importantly the timeliness when you get the data. So I think particularly on data we need a lot of training at the junior level where data is generated. I mean, there is this golden rule, right? If you get it right where it generates, where it is captured, you get everything right. You don't get it right where it gets captured, then there is a long process in which you keep seeing data the way you want.
Okay. All right. So you're saying there is lots of data.
There is lots of data. And in fact, wherever we go, we have done consulting engagements, and I'm sure Vijay can corroborate. You go sit with them for some time, you will find it. I mean, if anybody says they don't have data in government, just simply refuse to accept that because they have lots of data. You need to discover them.
Okay. Vijay, you have something to say?
What I'm going to do with that. So Rana pointed out very practically, that is how it happens. You'll get that information and what to do with that information and what is the training that I have to decipher meaning from that. When we look at private sector and the kind of numbers that we generate and what we do with that, the analysis that happens. So there is a buzzword now, you have AI or machine learning, those are buzzwords. Use case. Who is going to help them put that into use? How exactly it is going to get used? Blockchain. So you go and talk, you will always find this because these are in news, these subjects are being discussed. So you will find these are being talked about, but how to do those things? And technology, from technology point of view, whatever changes that are happening, how much are you attuned to that? Are you able to incorporate and come up with something which will at the end of the day make your to some extent your job easier, but also help in that last mile service delivery. One thing, and what Balu also mentioned, in India, government service in a way is seen as end in itself. So it is not means to something else, is end in itself. I need to be there. I need to be an IAS officer. I need to be a government servant. I need to be at least a state service officer. So that there is the motivation, the kind of motivation that is shown in getting a job and the kind of motivation which is there once you get a job is completely different. And that is something which we have to in capacity building element as well that needs to be worked on. And the second major issue and what happens is any new program which comes in, who is that person who is going to work on that? This is the last mile connectivity person. Nowadays, we are expecting, like in health, we expect everything from Asha, who is not a permanent employee. so every data collection in health system, everything will flow down to A&M, and then post A&M it will come to Asha, and that person is supposed to be part of some institutional delivery mechanism, and the money is from something else, but we are expecting everything. What is the kind of training that is happening? What is the motivation that is there? And similarly with teachers, this was way back when we did one study where we find out teacher is collecting at least 11, 12 different set of information. So everything, and that comes back to what is the job role of a teacher? What is the teacher supposed to be doing? And you'll find out that most of the times either they are taking care of midday meal, what is happening, or they're taking care of these surveys, data collection, all those things, and when are they going to teach as well? So these are some practical challenges that are there. And this is where this capacity building and training need assessment or capacity building assessment, these things come in terms of identifying that role, what is that function within that role, what is they supposed to be doing, and then how we need to empower them to deliver better on that, rather than just whatever comes, any new idea, we just push it to them. And then that becomes a challenge, because then what is the role they're supposed to be doing, they are not doing. What are they supposed to deliver, they are not able to. So these are practical challenges, but yes, and I can assure you, anyone who is here who has worked will relate to this, and we have been talking about this. It is not something which is new. It is not something I have come up with a new perspective. Nothing. I'm just verbalizing what in this particular forum everyone knows.
Absolutely, yeah. just kind of shifting the frame a little bit and just trying to look at the policy environment. You look at the last few years, if you look at policies, if you look at mandates, if you look at government missions, etc., right? So they've kind of tilted the narrative a little bit in terms of how even different stakeholders kind of interact with the government. And Vaishnav, if I can quickly start with you, so if you look at the CSR policy, I know it's like the new CSR policy is 8 years old now as we speak. But how has that, or has that kind of changed the way companies interact with government? I know that the reporting side of CSR brings it with its own set of challenges, etc. But even the way the policy was mandated, the way it's being implemented and overseen, so how does that shape the narrative in terms of both your thinking on CSR? That's one side of it, right? Has it changed the way you think, and has it changed the way you kind of interface with government institutions?
No, so I think the Companies Act 2013 brought in this requirement, and there was a period prior to that when this was anticipated. So there was adequate time for organizations to plan and prepare on how it would affect their lives, right? In terms of the amount that is demarcated, that has always been the ethos of the group that I work with. So the thrust areas and the kind of allocation that is there, none of that really changed. But what really changed in our approach was the measurement and effectiveness, efficacy of the application. Because we realized that there is greater expectation of transparency, accountability, and disclosures that's going to come up as we go around. And that's a movement that has been even reflected in the SEBI-mandated VRSR. So on the 9 principles of NRGBC, you are seeing that there is a higher disclosure requirement. So not really affected the way in which the work was being carried out, but in the way it was measured, reported, and the feedback loop that we were talking about in the previous panel also in terms of efficacy.
Okay. And were there examples of CSR projects that you were otherwise doing which suddenly came back and said, is this CSRable, as it were? Have you had those kind of challenges?
So we did have a relook at our thrust areas, and right now our thrust areas are education, employability, employment, and entrepreneurship. There was a significant amount of work that we were doing around water projects and in communities, etc. But there was a conscious decision taken that what the government needs to deliver for that particular ecosystem, we will not duplicate that effort. We will try and get into the enablement of that through education, through interaction, say, with village water communities, work with the Gram Panchayat, work with the local community to get self-sustaining projects there. But in terms of infrastructure, hardcore infrastructure that the government is going to, drive, I thought, there was a conscious decision of shifting out of that and avoiding duplicacy.
Okay, so in some sense, it kind of shaped your narrative, even if slightly, right? So, Nana, I'll pick your favorite area, the national education policy. So, do I need to say more? Go for it.
Well, see, without biases, because I think this particular state is going through both poles, like, suddenly NEP is greatest to NEP is wherever. But I think without any of those perspectives in that sense, this policy after 36 years has been a path-breaking, almost disruptive in nature in the way it is done. And none of what it says is out of context, right? For example, if it is saying you need to have multiple entry and exit, the whole world is experimenting in this. Today's learner doesn't want to stay for 4 full years and he or she wants to go experiment and the system doesn't allow. Today you don't get into the system. I mean, if you get into the system and you don't stay for at least 3 years, you don't get anything meaningful. And gone are the days where you can do one discipline and then call yourself a scholar. Like, if you're doing only physics and then say I'm a scholar, it doesn't make any sense because the interdependency has grown a lot. And hence the policy says even IITs are not universities. The tall IITs, unless you have interoperability and others. Yeah. It says if you don't bring in vocational education into your higher education, it is meaningless. The number of graduates who are not employable, it's a joke, right? I mean, they spend so much time, government spends so much time, there are so many people. The largest market cap sector in this country is education. Not iron and steel, not any of those things. So there have been so much money from private and public sector has gone into it, and the output is for everybody to see. And hence it says bring in vocational education, which is just kind of languishing as an alternate sector that nobody even wants to try kind of stuff. So these tenets and hence how do you do it? Then there becomes the issue, like, we talk about academic bank of credits. So ABC is a good concept. Try and implement this, and I'm sure you are doing it.
Yeah.
It becomes difficult. ABC becomes difficult in your own institution. Now, government is saying, or NEP is saying, it should be interoperable across institutions. Now, how do you make courses? But it is a reality because the student is asking for it. I really like the way in one of those interactions, Prime Minister, there was a young boy who asked, what is NEP? And I was very curious, like, how do you explain? And so what the PM said is very telling. He said, NEP changes the education system to what you want rather than what we want to teach. Now, making that happen is not going to be easy. All these changes that you see, both in school education and higher education, is all moving towards a student-centric education that we want. We did a project for Nanyang Technical University. These guys are usually ahead, right? The NTU is perhaps a case study of sorts as to how somebody can grow so fast. There is a polytechnic, and that is number 13 in the world, ranked number 13 as a university. They've done really, really well. And they said our processes are archaic. So what do you want to do? We want to change this entire process to be student-centric. A student walks into NTU, he or she should feel that every resource, every asset in this institute is for me. And how do you do that? Not just for student, for alumni and other. So NEP is talking about changing, and it talks about examinations. See, we dread examinations, right? I mean, you ask any kid, what is that one thing that you hate in a school? Examination. Rest all are okay. So they're saying, why do you need examinations that is more rote-based, which is testing how good you are? God forbid you are unwell that day, you had a fight with your parent or something like that. The rest of your life is gone. So they offer multiple ways of doing it and it's not easy. And without taking time, I'll tell you one small example. So we talk about, assess students for their understanding and not for what they have.
Remember.
So I was talking to a teacher, and she was saying with all, humility and other stuff. See, I was teaching something on nutritious value of food, right? So normally what do? We say bread, so much nutritious value, idli, so much nutritious value, paratha, so much. And then we ask a question, what is the nutritious value of paratha? So you want to make it experiential. So the question we wanted to ask is, what did you have for breakfast? And what is the nutrition value of that? How do you correct this paper? So when the assessment happened, every child so the teachers, the most important component, that is one area I believe NEP should have focused more. The faculty and teachers who are going to be the most important change makers, who are going to be the change agents, I think there should be a lot more focus on them. They will decide, because right now, many faculty, with all due respect, have a bit of concern as to what is their value in the whole change that is happening. That is not clearly defined in my view. So I'll stop there. As you know, I'll keep going on.
Just a quick question as follow-up. So on the NEP, I mean, like you yourself started off, there are multiple views on it, right, in a sense. But in terms of the process, and I know you were at the peak of it, but how did that consultation process happen in terms of involvement of private institutions?
This is very interesting, because NEP is one of the first policies that was truly consultative, right? To an extent where our entire report of one commission and other things was completely junked because it was not consultative enough. Now, you can still say so-and-so was not consulted, so-and-so group. For about a year or so, it was put for public consultation. That is how a policy should happen. And there were expert committees that were formed, and it was presented to them. Fortunately, I was in one of them, so I know it was done with all. And the humongous amount of inputs that have come, they were all categorized. Some of them were put as, and there was a genuine effort to bring in the opinions of various set of people from the private sector and others as well, and come up with something that could be a culmination of whatever that. So the consultation was widespread, and a policy that reflected that. The only aspect is, for a policy of such nature, the implementation or the facets of implementation and prioritization of it, and the center versus state, that is the trickiest of issues. Yeah. Some of those things could have been addressed, but otherwise it is, in fact, in one of the universities, they asked us to have a case study on policy development. We took NEP, and it was a case study on how NEP was conceptualized. It took 3-4 years for it to become a whatever it is, act that it is. And I think that way it is one of the model kind of policies where consultations were widespread, impact was very high, and it is touching every single aspect of that particular ecosystem.
Oh, great. So I'm also aware that you need to catch a flight, so I'm just going to pick my most important question now with you. So you talked about saying that the consultation process could have been better, some of the things could have been done more efficiently, etc. So I'm just kind of extracting from there and looking at our discussions today about government and building institutional capacity in the government. What are some lessons that government can or the private sector can bring into the table to drive?
Yeah, I was almost expecting this question, so I'm glad you asked this. So again, there are 5 elements that I thought should be weaved into the government training program. See, the government training program can be in a classroom, can be through private parties coming and teaching them. And there, like I think Balu mentioned, there is a whole lot of changes that is happening right from Labasna, and which is the Lal Bahadur Academy and many other places. But it still has not touched. In fact, there are 2 programs that we did in KPMG I want to highlight. One for civil services learning in UK and the other for the National Health Service in UK. This was done in a manner where, first of all, the training was to the last level of employee to the whatever is the secretary who's reading that. It was not for one section unless that entire vertical is taken. And the second thing, the way it was done is it was not one homogeneous thing that you do. There are nuggets of it that were there. So you can pick whatever, and it was linked to their career progression. That is, if you are a health worker and you want to choose a particular career, then you choose certain pieces of it, and then you do it and you build your career. And there were assessments and other things that can be done wherever. It was not one of those. So with some of the civil services learning, incidentally, is still going on. It is a 7-year program. And they want to ensure that there is a complete change in the mindset of every employee of the government of UK. Now, I would think, and as a learning, and I'm sure they are learning, in fact, some of these case studies are with them, is as follows, the 5 things that I said. 1, the learning should be continuous. There is absolutely no point in having one big training program once in a year or once in 2 years and expect that everybody will start learning. It has to be continuous learning. And like they say in development sector, it has to be low dose, high frequency. I mean, there's no point in having a very high impact training once and then leave them. It doesn't work that way because things are changing. The second is the flexibility in terms of the attitude of what needs to get developed. I think one of the officers mentioned today that there is no job role for somebody in government. And truly you need to, I'm amazed at how they work. You go in, every day there could be something new and you need to adapt and start doing it. So is there flexibility in the training programs, or are you taught in something then you go and think that you will have to do? So the training program, more than the technical content of what they do, should be in terms of how they can adopt and build these things. The third one is, every day if there is something, there is additional that is coming. Nuggets that you can pick up from multi-mode. There is an online mode, there is one peer learning, there is something that is happening because of the job that you are assigned, there is something that you learn. So how do you piece in all these things together? While there is learning that is happening, nobody is telling them every day what you go through is learning. You ask me, people in government go through the maximum exposure and they should be the best in terms of training because they are not aware that each one of these things is adding to their portion. So I think there should be a larger framework in which they are told, like we do in B schools, that every single interaction that you have need not necessarily is part of your learning, and somebody can collect all these things. Hey, you have learned all these things, and maybe an assessment and other things that will justify that. The fourth thing in trainings that I see is the convenience part is largely ignored. Right? Today there are a lot of online training which comes in various different formats and other stuff. And then there are trainings that are happening with some of the training providers like yourself, IHS and others as well. How do you make sure you give the convenience to the learner? That's what we learned in the UK Civil Service, and tell them learning is your agenda. You decide, and I have this big ecosystem of where you can pick from wherever you are and you can learn, and convenience of assessment, convenience of they're choosing their career path and other things should be given to them. Last but not the least, the behavioral aspect. Right? Most of the training today is happening on some technical area, not even all, some technical area. Suppose you are now dealing with a set of people who are looking at instant gratification. you are dealing with a particular area where, like Vijay mentioned, there's a blockchain. First, I should know what is blockchain. That is the technical. Second part of it, because blockchain is in place, the complaints that are going to come to me, the issues that is going to be very different. Am I prepared for the non-technical aspect of dealing with this? Usually not there. So I would think this would be my thinking. And last but not the least, I think there should be a structured program in my view. How do we learn from all these consultants who are working? More often than not, we get out some of this project and they say, something wrong with you guys because after you got out, nothing is working. I guess when government hires consultants, the first thing they should do, like many corporates do, is plan for when these people go out, have I learned whatever that the reason
Knowledge transfer.
Yeah. Sorry, I think
No.
overstepped
That's
my
most
brain.
helpful. A couple of things, Vijay, I'd like you to add on to this, but specifically on the last point that you raised about continuity, right? Therefore, transfer of learning, which really comes down to an implementation question, because as a consultant, you will take me up there, and then after that, I have to drink the water and move on. So, any reflections on that? And the second thing, Vijay, before I start out, is we spoke about this, Nana spoke about technology usage or the relatively low technology usage. And Mr. Balu also kind of highlighted that in his conversation in the morning, saying technology is kind of a given and the government needs to kind of get there. So any stories, any examples, any reflections on these two?
We were talking because we are having a performance.
Coffee and we were talking. All the, I think 80%, more than 80% PMUs of government would be run by consulting firms. So it is there. It would be there. Be a project management units, and then there would be other players. So any new program, any new World Bank, ADB funding, any new funding which is coming, there will be a PMU. So the PMU will be manned by consultants, consulting firms. Now the challenge which happens is, and we all talk about sustainability. Sustainability is those program components, those elements, those get institutionalized. Government adopts that, the systems, everything is in place, and they function with that. So you have to have a plan of what will happen when after 3 years or 5 years, these consultants are going to go. But in many of the cases, what happens is, rather than we changing, adopting these things, it is like this is a new program which is coming. We do not have a bandwidth to do that. So these are the guys who are going to do this. And then these are the guys who will do. And when these guys will go, then again it will come to the same system which was already there. So that's the biggest challenge. And mind you, and this is one thing which I keep on mentioning, that when we work with World Bank, ADB, everything, we are taking loan. We are paying interest on that. So if you are not keeping those sustainability issues in mind, then we are not using that money wisely. So new system can come, like NEP. One of the thing was, like, again, we are running 3 PMUs with NEP, with World Bank. The thing is, because there are new elements there, because there are things which there is a lot of unlearning and relearning required. So you want with SCRT, with DIET, with others, you want consultants to help them out. But at the end of the day, there has to be a lot more understanding and role responsibilities of the people who are permanently there in these structures. If that doesn't happen, as soon as the consultants will move out, none of these things will work. And that is one of the biggest challenge with any department, any PMUs that we look at. And again, it comes back to the basic things. What was the role that was supposed to be taken up? What is the role I see for these people once the consultants go back? What is the role of DIET going to be, SCRT going to be, whether they will, how exactly they will adapt to NEP, what are the things they're supposed to be doing on that? And this is a major challenge. So having said that, one thing I think he mentioned around NEP again, when NEP is getting implemented, it's being adopted. What is the roles, responsibilities of different stakeholders going to change? Are they going to be same? Is it going to change? If it is going to change, has anyone communicated to them what is their role going to be now? What is it that they are supposed to be doing now? So what happens is NEP comes and it will sit on top of what they're doing. and they are not changing to what is the change that's going to come. So one of the element that we are working is again is what does NEP mean at each level within the education department? What is it in for them? What is the teacher has to know in NEP? Because there is another document called Sarthak which has a lot of list of activities that needs to be done by state and everything. But the major point is for each of the stakeholders, if there are BOs, DOs, teachers, diet teachers, what is their role in NEP? What is it they are supposed to be doing? And this is not just for NEP, this is for any other new schemes, any other programs which is coming in any other department. So roles, responsibilities, and clearly listing out. And then if they have a PMU, what is that activity of PMU that will be taken up, the changes that needs to happen in the department once the PMU moves? That is very critical. You had a second question.
On the technology side.
Okay. See, I have seen technology from a different perspective, I would say. Whenever people feel the use for that and they understand, they will use it. If it makes their job easier, they will use it. And I have seen that especially with WhatsApp. There's a separate WhatsApp university which is there. Most of us are educated or learning through WhatsApp university, and I've seen at very, very, very basic, very remote locations, WhatsApp being one of the major element which has been adopted. Even basic smartphones they are using there, and in some cases it is helping them. It is reducing some of the work, some of the burden. So technology, if it helps in doing that, there is much more eager adoption of it. But if it adds to that having a technology either makes me do more work, makes me collect more data, then there will be a challenge, because additional work associated with that creates a lot of resistance. But if it helps ease your work, why not? And I have seen very, and at least in government department, the kind of adversity they face and the kind of solutions they are able to come up. Like I have seen, we did this project in Nagaland where we wanted to see how technology can play a role in the education system. And there the major challenge was textbook delivery. They were not able to deliver textbook in time. So we had all the systems in place. We said, okay, we will have a barcode, we will do other things. But what we realized is their system of everyone coming together, all teachers from a particular cluster coming together, going to the district, hiring a car, going to the district, getting books and distributing, was far more efficient, and they were far more comfortable with that, with all the technologies coming in. So for me, the technology it should ease whatever the work that they are doing. It should make their job easier. It should help them do the job better. If it adds more work to them, it is not going to get implemented. And that is going to be there, and your experience also will be around those things.
Okay. Vaishnavi, so if you look at big corporates like the Tatas or any of the others, so what are some things that you think they can teach government institutions, and other mechanisms through which you think that can be kind of enabled?
So absolutely. I think, we have, being in a sector like power, we are building the energy security for the nation, and we do have interface with the government, whether it is in distribution in Delhi, in Ajmer and in Odisha, or in large generation plants like Methane, etc. So in our experience, what we've realized is that bringing in accountability and efficiency really matters, and which is where I think the government looks at a private partnership more often than not. The second thing is, I think, working with a very focused approach rather than making the elephant dance. If you can pick up a specific problem and try and solve for it. Like for instance, we recognize that there is a huge need of reskilling or a skill for green jobs, which is emerging as we go forward, because there is this huge amount of capacity addition that is going to happen on solar. For instance, if you followed the news, then Germany does not have skilled manpower to be able to do the capacity addition on solar that's required. They are looking outside of their country's boundaries to be able to bring in those skilled manpower, right? So we set up Tata Power Skill Development Institute in the year 2009 with the very specific objective of vocational training, with the end objective that once you have completed this very short focused training, you will be able to find employment basis this particular training. We've touched about 1 lakh plus lives, 16,000 per annum, etc. So in terms of learning, I think it is accountability, short bursts, focused effort that can really, meet the outcome and build ground up rather than, try and systematically change everything in one go. You might have everything on paper and policy and systems, but unless and until you execute and implement that, to see the outcome is very tough.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah. See, from a CSR, because again, we are doing a lot of work in CSR with corporates, corporate foundations. One thing we have to understand is in last 8 years, the CSR funding would have been somewhere 99,000 lakhs, I think, somewhere around 99,000 crores. 99,000 crore will be that. Education budget government of India for 1 year is more than a lakh. So at the end of the day, the biggest welfare provider and service provider is government. And I'm just talking about education. There are other departments, other social sectors which are there. So for CSR, I don't think any company is thinking of replacing government, and they are not trying to replicate what government is trying to do. I don't see a rationale there. But where CSR plays a very critical role is engaging with government and coming up with models which can help government do the work better. It can be in technology, it can be in skilling, it can be in education, it can be in other sectors. Because if you are going to say, I'll establish a model school, and the model school education is far better than what a government school education is, absolutely. The kind of per person, per child investment that is happening, it will always come to the better conclusion than what is there. But is there a model which can be implemented by government, which can be adopted? It need not be a complete systemic change. It can be a simple issues related to maybe teacher training. It can be use of technology in terms of monitoring evaluation. It can be use of technology in training as well. Something which government can easily adopt, and then that improves their overall service delivery. And that is where a CSR or a company can play far better, far effective role in utilizing that $1 of CSR money to go far more than what they are doing. And so that is my take. But again, corporates, they have their mission, vision, policies, everything. But this is how I see the corporate sector working with government in some of the for some of the public goods, some of the social sector development things.
Thanks, Vijay. That's been a great summary. I think it's also a good time to close. No more cruel thing than to stand between people and lunch, and people and flights in this case as well.
Thank you so much.
Great conversation. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
You kind of
Kedar.
open our
Thank
eyes
everyone. Thank
to the
you so
private
much.
sector. So
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
So how do we kind of like get the best practices from both the big companies like Infosys or TCS or something, and also the new emerging startup culture where we have sprints and we have clarity and we deliver faster and there's clear lines and pressure to grow. Like how do we sync the government so that this culture is part of it?
okay, so I'll just quickly address this and then move it to the participants. I think there are two levels at which we're kind of looking at how do we bridge that. One is in terms of building individual skills. Right? If you're running, I think it's working. Yeah. So one is at the individual level. So if there are people with skills in the private sector doing roles which can be comparable to people working in the government, is there a mechanism where we can kind of get those people to come in during training programs? And that's something that you normally tend to do in a training program, right? So you try to bring people from the private sector to kind of talk to the government. But I think the larger question that you're also raising is in terms of structures, the way they work, right? So can we learn, for instance, the way Tatas organize themselves? Because they are more comparable to a government than perhaps a startup which probably has one set of product offerings. So I think that's really the challenge in terms of bringing the institutional bridge. And I'll just hand it over to see if there are any additional reflections from the panelists on that.
I don't know. I don't think these are comparable. I don't think, and let me be frank, a lot of government systems presently which are running are all has come from private sector. For private sector, government is a very big client. For most of the private sector, government is a very, very, very big client, including consulting as well. So all the systems, everything has come from them. But the point is the reward recognition, is the accountability, transparency around that, the system process, is it same? Can we compare a private company or a startup with a government? We cannot. These are completely different structure. The organization, how it is organized, is completely different. How they are going to the market is completely different. So the question will be, identify some of the bottlenecks and see if there are good cases, good case studies, use case from private sector which can be implemented to remove the bottleneck, and vice versa. Like COVID implementation, or the training that happens in government for different cadre, the kind of model that government has and is able to mobilize that is also learning for private sector, that how exactly you can reach that market with that kind of number. Having said it, we have to be very careful. Not everything, like you can say agile, you can say sprint. I don't think those are the things that are going to come in government sector for some time now. It will take time. It is not going to be now. So we have to be very realistic on what we can bring in. What is the delta change we are looking at? So, but yes, they should know. Absolutely, but
Yeah.
Sorry, I think, what we are really undertaking is an exercise in change management. And it is with the speed at which these iterations are happening, and, we are moving into the next phase of learning, it is very difficult to build all the competencies within one organization, whether it is the government or a private sector. And it's perhaps in my limited experience, I think there is specialized groups like the one that your friend has with those 100 engineers who are doing a specific job and doing it to the best of their capacity. So outsourcing with a specific intent and to the best of the capacity, performance linked assignments, I think that is a very beautiful model that I can see, whether it's with the government or with the private sector. So something food for thought. How do we really approach it? Do we own everything and then you expect the same set of people to have the capability that is required for the next iteration, or do we really allow that flexibility within each organization to be able to loan from outside the skill sets that you don't yourself own? And consulting does that very often, so I'm sure that he will agree.
absolutely, and that is what is happening when the government says less government, more governance. So at the end of the day, you need to have systems. It is not about adding more manpower into the system, but it is about being effective. Whatever is there, how effective we can be. And what is it, the learning that is there, which can be from private sector, which can be from other government in other countries. And that happens also. It is not that it's very monolith and no change is happening. But yes, the pace at which change is happening, for anyone in the private sector, they may feel this is nothing is changing. But no, it is not like that. Changes are happening, but yes, it takes time.
Yeah. Hi. First of all, this is very well thought out deliberation and discussion, and thanks to all the panelists. I am Dr. Manoj. I come from KHPT, India. And we are a public health organization majorly working with the communities, vulnerable communities, along with government. So we have a strong partnership with government. Just the question of Mr. Ramaswamy is not here, the homogeneous population in terms of technical expertise. The one part of that problem is, as you also rightly spoken about, Mr. Vijay, is not really only the skill development or this thing only matters. Also need to be seen what power we are delivering during those trainings to the participants, to the question of system. So the sense of empowerment and delivering the power, delegating the power also itself is a very poor. We have seen, as far as our experiences working with different set of policymakers as well as implementers, frontline workers. Just to give an example, in Mysore 2 years back, we are doing a large scale training program of the frontline workers on NCDs, non-communicable diseases. And one part of that program objective was delivering people-centered care. So where they will identify the prioritized houses, they'll visit there and then deliver the services. But then after that training, what we found, 6-month follow-up, is the protocols from the department is really very rigid, and they can't really go to those houses. Those are prioritized. They have to go end of the day all the houses, and that itself diluting the intervention. So sometimes, although the capacity is also there and they want to lead the change as a contributor of change from this capacity development programs, sometimes they are tired of with this protocols and power from higher ups. So that because the medical officer doesn't allow to the ASA, and the same kind of dynamics goes through across the label. So this is not really question, just addition to what been spoken.
No,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thanks.
I believe resilience is the greatest factor in success of any of the programs, and you just
That's
have
a
to
very
stay the course.
important point, but thank you. for
Just
bringing
to add also, there are also brighter minds in implementers and also the frontline workers, but really they have to, follow certain orders, certain point of time. So that's.
that's
Yeah. So yes, personally, I also thought that the panel discussion was quite insightful. My question is rooted to something because we have discussed quite extensively over education, right? And in a way, I just wanted to touch upon this because we've also spoken about teachers, be it primary or secondary, upper secondary schools and all, and these teachers become the primary source of data collectors for not only schemes related to education, but different other schemes as well. And that pattern kind of can be resonated in other primary institution service providers among the government institutions itself. So my question comes in from places where there are new capacity development programs and other skills that we want them to adapt into, and we try to do that. But in the present setting, being trying to serve as a primary objective to deliver on certain things that are already that the school demands or the student demands, there are certain parameters that they can't obscure with. And in most of the cases, there are definitely challenges in delivering those primary objectives itself. And when it comes to kind of treating that, I may be biased, but sometimes it can be seen that these two environments are treated as two different ecosystems altogether. There is an ecosystem that tries to persuade them to kind of adapt into newer measures and upskill themselves to the newer kind of programs that can be implemented. And there is another ecosystem in which they have to deliver with whatever crunches that they may have, or be it their lack of resources or other facilitations in a way. And because we've spoken so much on the new policies that are coming in, just the comment then, do you think these two environments should actually overlap? That's what we always think about and speak and aspire to, but I'm sure there are challenges. Now, when we try to overlap them, what do you see there needs to be changes, or do you think this needs to happen simultaneously? Or I'm sure the transition will happen, but definitely the time frame around it maybe.
See, what I mentioned in the first element is training is not capacity development. Okay. And in many cases, what we have seen is we have provided training without changing the organizational design or the systemic challenges. So if you keep everything same, which is like all the conditions, everything same, training can go only up. There can be a very delta change because beyond those systems, that person may not be able to do anything else. So that challenge will remain. So that is why when we are looking at capacity development, we also have to see what is it that systemic level changes or policy changes or organizational changes that also needs to happen for that person whom the training is provided, for whom to whom the training is provided is able to deliver more. And what is the final outcome we are looking at, and how exactly all these three things work toward giving that kind of impetus. Like at the end of the day, the teachers, what is the role? It is to provide quality education. What are the system process changes as a policy level need to happen to do that? If that understanding is there, then this problem won't be there. But what happens is, in the same system, we are saying, okay, you learn technology and now you start using smart classes. No, it won't happen. It won't happen because it will take time. The person who has just started using mobile now, you suddenly give and say, I've trained you on smart classes and now you start doing that. It's very difficult. Like, I can give you an example. I have taught classes in management institutes in COVID times and non-COVID times. For me to adapt myself with that all blank boxes in COVID times is pretty difficult. And I used to keep on asking someone, did you understand? Did you not understand? Can you open your video? Can I see? And they would say, network is not right. This is not right. And I can feel that many of them are not interested as well. So in that kind of situation, and you can imagine, I'm talking about management students, you can imagine the children. So where the attention span is even less. So it's a challenge. So that kind of training, but with training, it has to have all the other system changes have to happen. And then only this ecosystem will overlap or it will be same. Otherwise, it will always be like this.
So just to add,
Sorry, go ahead.
just to add to that, I think, teachers have one of the most demanding jobs because you don't have the luxury of time. You have just so much time and, a large set of students who need to understand the concept, and you really don't get feedback, then it's very challenging. And the second thing is that the customers themselves are tough because children have low attention spans, and the parents come back with, they are more involved with those 1 or 2 children who are in school right now, and they make the teacher's life difficult sometimes. So going back to what Vijay said earlier, if what the teacher's capability development is focusing on makes their lives easier, it makes their day-to-day job easier, I think it will be much more reasonable to expect the teachers to, try and merge both the worlds together, use the newer skill sets and make their day-to-day job easy.
Now, just to add on, just to synthesize what we've been discussing here, I think when you look at an environment changing or an ecosystem changing, it's not going to happen so easily, right? One way that change happens is if there is a huge shock from the external environment, and COVID is a classic example, right? That made us do a lot of things very differently from what we would have otherwise even dreamt of doing. But you don't want those kind of shocks to be happening too often in your life. One COVID a lifetime is probably good enough for most of us, right? The second kind of change that happens is something that's driven from the top. A policy directive, a leadership directive. When if you look at large corporates, if you look at even the government, some of those kind of drive, because then there is a non-negotiable target or a non-negotiable goal that is set for yourself. And the third kind of change is what most of us are going to be dealing with, which is change that's going to happen from within the constituent parts of the environment, which is changing behavior of people, changing work units, changing subsystems, etc. And that is what most of us are going to be battling with in most of our work lives, as it were. And if you look at the theme of what we are also trying to discuss, it's not about individual capacity change, but institutional development. And that happens through stages, through processes. It's going to be painstaking. If there were an easy solution, I don't think we'll be in this room at all. But yeah.
But on the third point, I think we need to also address the parallel ecosystems that are coming up to education. Right?
Yes.
So how do you integrate the both to be able to, actually facilitate the job of the teacher?
Now that's in the nature of an external shock again. Yeah. Sorry, do we have some online
there is an online question. The question is based on the premise that there's an over-reliance on the private sector where private consultants come and run PMUs, and there's an over-dependence on the private sector from the government. So is there a way the government can up-level themselves and handle these issues on their own?
It's absolutely. See, at the end of the day, when any plan comes, any PMU is set up, the only thing they have to say is what will happen when these people, 5, 7, 10, whatever the number they go, what is it that we need to do? Just that planning. Who is going to do what is the kind of capacity that is required within the department, within the system to adapt to the change that is going to happen when they are living. And this is not something, this is for today. We have seen in private sector and earlier also we have seen supplementary teachers. So when in government schools there were a lot of other CSR programs also where they provided one additional teacher. When you provided additional teacher, what happened was the teacher who was supposed to be teaching, they gave all the teaching job to that additional teacher, and their job was easy now. But at the end of the day, what happened was when they moved out, when that project ended, then what? So that challenge will always remain when we talk about PMU. The idea should be they have come for a specific purpose. What is it? What changes I need to do in the department, in the system, and the process and the policies so that when they leave, I'm able to manage this project and I'm able to manage this change, and my people who are going to be permanently there have the capacity to handle this. Because for short duration, you are able to get a lot of technical people who are very good at those things. But at the end of the day, the other who are there in the department have to manage it. So that change has to happen, that roadmap has to be built in. And the 3-year, the government should be utilizing not just the PMU for the technical input, but also for building the capacity of the people within the department. So this is easier said than done, but yeah.
As you said, 90% of all the missions has been backed by the consultant in either way in corporate
I
side.
don't have the data. It's a guesswork.
No, it's true also when we are working at one thing which we find out from the practitioners level, as you said, that you reflect policies, you support to draft RFPs, tenders, and everything it is there. But when it going to the grassroots level, sometimes people say it's different what it is coming on the implementation side. Whether you are as a PMU, as a corporate level, it's working with the grassroots level people to understand the regional thing.
Yeah. So those are part and parcel of a lot of other implementation work as well. For PMU, when we talked about NEP implementation as well, there to talk to the grassroots level, not just the frontline delivery person, but also to the beneficiary to understand their perspective, and then you work on the plan and build on that. But yes, it depends on PMU to PMU what is the role that they were supposed to play. Is it just going to be at a state level? Is it something which will percolate to district and block level? What is the role going to be? So it completely depends on that. But yes, this is a very any business which is running would like to understand what the consumer is thinking. For that, the consumer presently will be the people and the beneficiary who is going to get that service. So yeah, that is there.
So I think we have time for just one more question, perhaps. Yeah.
As part of the consulting for the tourism minister, actually. So what she's raising the concern is that there is one consultancy which is probably working with multiple ministries, right? Like let's say BBMP solid waste management. Okay, there is a consultancy which is paid huge money, like 60 lakhs per month or something like that. But what she says is on the ground, the waste management problem is not yet solved. And still, we are believing that this consultant's ideas, there might be, I'm not saying he might be wrong, right? The government itself might not want to implement his suggestions, right? So that is one aspect of it. Second aspect of it, probably this approach of asking consultant might not be apt for that case. So there's a more need for a more local involved, decentralized people who might know more than what the consultant knows. That's what, am I right, madam? So that's what.
Do you have any more online questions? No?
See, okay.
You have a question?
You had a question? No, okay. So I was waiting for that. That's why. See, possible. I can't deny or say that, and I don't think anyone can say that the consultants knows everything. It is not the case. There are so many other, as pointed out in earlier session as well, that there is indigenous knowledge, which is pretty much there, and there are local solutions which consultant may not know, which is true. The point is going to be, what is that role that they were supposed to play? What is the role and what is the specialty that they are bringing in, and whether they are accountable to that. So that is the chance. If you're saying that you brought them for something else and expecting something else, then that is not fair. So if last mile delivery is going to be by a private sector, then yes, make them accountable for that. So whatever is the draft is there, whatever is the clauses that has been drafted, that should ensure that accountability is there. But if you get at times, which will happen, you get a person for developing strategy, and then you come back and say that implementation was not right, then that is not fair. So that is why it is better to look at the entire cycle from strategy to implementation. How will it get implemented? Whether the solution which has been provided is relevant, whether that is effective, whether that is efficient, we have to see from that angle. So, and I can assure you, in government also, the kind of people who are there, they're very, very sharp. It is, okay, but at times and Balu mentioned also, we may say this is not happening, that is not happening, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they are very, very sharp mind over there. So, because we sit there, we understand kind of questions that are asked and the kind of answers that we have to give, they're very sharp people.
Great, okay. We're done with questions, so thank you so much. Back to you, Aishwarya.
And thank you, and thank you for taking time, because I think it's a lunch time now, it's getting delayed as well. So yeah, please, thank you.
Thank you, Geeta. Thank you, Ms. Vaishnavi. Thank you, Mr. Vijay. Thank you all for your patience. Lunch is ready, it's served. We will come back at 2:45 p.m. for panel 3. We're running a little late, but we will make up in time for it. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Those who are joining online, please note that we are taking a break of 55 minutes. We will resume at 2:45. Thank you.